Part 2 in a two-part series on the Warhammer races. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, we do the Imperium of Man. You can check that out in the description, and I would highly recommend
to be
watch
fair,
that to get context for
you
this
could
episode.
basically TLDR this entire thing by just saying
after an entire episode
humans
of
bad,
nothing but humans, we can now
aliens
talk about
bad,
chaos, which involves
Tau,
humans again,
not
but
bad
a little bit
really,
less. We also got demons
but also bad.
I just felt someone grab my ass. Like hard, Nick.
So, as I've mentioned many times before,
demons.
Hey,
these are my
warp,
these are my
the
dudes.
Immaterium, the hellish landscape, the purgatory dimension realm between the material realm of our existence. Now, in the warp, it's terrifying, horrible. There are demons everywhere.
Going into the warp
crazy.
is like going
All
into
your
my
minds,
bedroom
thoughts, and
after
emotions
one
get
night of
projected
Taco
there.
Cabana.
It is both formless and empty. It is vast and tiny. It obeys the laws of time and physics.
The warp is like what it would be trying to have a psychiatrist analyze my brain.
Just unknowable, eldritch,
Good to know.
Shit. And there are 4 gods that permeate in chaos
small.
and the warp. These are the 4 major gods. And if we
Ronald McDonald, Colonel Sanders, Wendy, and the lobster from Red Lobster. Am I wrong with that? I'm pretty sure that's what it is, right?
wish to learn about chaos, we need to learn about each and every single one of these chaos gods. First
I am
up,
so
we have
doped
Khorne,
up on
and
caffeine
he
for
is
this,
the
goddamn.
easiest. Khorne is your classic Satan. He is all about anger, murder, fighting, blood, guts, death. You've heard the term
Khorne!
blood for the blood god.
Blood for the blood god!
Throne.
Skulls for the skull
Khorne.
throne!
The whole
Dude,
idea
Khorne's the OG,
is that
yo.
He is all about the fury and strength of
God, my
battle.
sister
He
used to
doesn't
collect
care
chaos
where
when we were
blood
younger.
comes from, so long as
This goes to
blood
show
is
just
flowing.
how dichotomous me and my sister were. When I started collecting Warhammer back in the day, I collected Space Marines. I was the cool kid. I was like, haha, simplicity is key. And my sister, because me and my sister were twins, right? So, obviously that means we want to be as diegetically opposed as possible. So my sister, as a way to rebel, would always choose the complete opposite of whatever I do. I would eat an apple, she'd eat a banana. I would choose to watch My Little Pony, she would watch Happy Tree Friends. You know? So I collected Space Marines, she collected Chaos, just to be a dick.
He wants to fight and murder
And yes,
and
Tia,
carnage
yes.
and slaughter and death, 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 death. That is Khorne. Very simple to understand. Next up, you have Tzeentch, and Tzeentch is the god of change.
Hi, Tia.
However, the god of change
Tzeentch!
permeates
He's
in
the
so many
he's
different
the
other
Loki
ways.
of
He's
things.
the most eldritch of all the demon gods. He has this weird way to always be plucking at the strings of the universe. He's always
So, a
conniving,
typical Twitch moderator.
scheming, and doing his best to cause as much little bullshit as he can. Tzeentch is,
Yeah, a Twitch moderator.
unknowable. Everything that makes sense, he will and won't do. Every future and
No, not a
no.
I'm talking about a Twitch admin, sorry.
Is all foretold.
Like a Twitch
and
moderator,
also
not a
changeable. It is
channel
set in stone
moderator.
while
You know what I
also
mean? The Twitch staff,
completely
Twitch staff,
random.
Twitch
He knows
staff.
what
I mean, Twitch
everything is
moderators
going to
too,
happen,
but Twitch
and
staff mainly.
Also that none of it's going to happen. You would ask Tzeentch a question. That question leads to 3 more questions, and those questions lead to the heat death of the universe, which asks 4 answers to those questions. And then he thinks to himself, what are questions even really? And are you even asking the questions, or are you simply giving paths to answers and other horseshit?
So basically dealing with a
Tzeentch
typical
is just-
Jehovah's Witness.
stuff.
What?
He is
Why do I feel like Matt Mercer would voice Tzeentch? I mean, to be fair, Matt Mercer literally voices everything at this point, but that's beside the point.
yes, and he is no. He is the understanding, and he is complexity. He is unknowable, and that's what the God of Change is about. Very bizarre.
Just
He
a
likes
cute little
birds
guy
a
doing
lot.
cute
I
little
don't know
things,
about
causing
why.
mischief
Next
and
up, we got
mayhem, yes.
Papa
Papa Nurgle!
He loves you for
I
who
don't-
you
I don't
are.
even
Probably
collect
not.
Chaos
He will
Knight
murder
play
you just the
Nurgle.
same. But Papa Nurgle is about rot, pestilence, death, and decay. He is the end of everything. Him and Tzeentch do not like each other very much because where Tzeentch represents change and adjustment, Nurgle represents stagnation and death.
Alright,
He
chat,
is
which
all
one are
about
you guys following? Are you following
pestilence,
Nurgle,
and
Chaos,
large
Tzeentch, or Slaanesh?
bloat and pus and organs and people just being sedentary.
The correct
sloth.
answer is
He is the
Khorne.
idea that everything will rot and decay and die. Nothing is
I don't know,
certain
Slaanesh
besides
God. I don't know who
decay
you would be
and death.
following.
All
Heck,
of us
W.
will end up the same way. broken down through just sheer never-ending decomposition.
Papa Nurgle would be
So
that
the
much
joke
chaos that he'd
Nurgle
go
always
stream on
loves you is
Kick.
generally because
Clearly.
of that, because we all end up the same. We all rot, and we all die and wither. That's Nurgle, and he's got a general theme of course, pestilence and
Oh man, that's
and
nasty.
different kinds of
Like
diseases and
Nurgle with
sicknesses
all
and
that
things like
body
That's
horror
generally
would creep me
Nurgle.
the
He's pretty
fuck
easy to
out.
understand as well.
I love it, but I
Chunk.
hate it at the same
Finally,
time.
we have the youngest of the Chaos Gods, and that is Slim.
The typical VTuber choice. Now, as a surprise, I wouldn't actually choose Slanesh because it's cringe. And yes, I know, I'm a big busty succubus VTuber, of course. You would expect my choice to be Slanesh because, haha, titties. But no.
Nesh,
I would
also
rather
known
not.
As the Prince of Pleasure or the God of Unspeakable Excess. Slanesh is generally referred to with sex, but it's not only sex, it's just that's a good avenue if you want to make stuff. Slanesh is just the idea of the senses of the body being cranked to not just 11, but more like 17. So we'll discuss Slanesh a little bit more when we talk about the Eldar.
Ah
'cause
yes,
done fucked up.
Slanesh.
But he,
It.
or whatever, is mainly about just the
Slanesh's
excess of emotion.
pronouns?
And therefore,
Slanesh's
sex is
pronouns
generally a large
are
part of it.
O
However,
and
it's
baby.
Mostly pain and torture.
Yeah,
Lots of
Slanesh
pain,
is such a
torture,
basic
but
bitch
sometimes
pick.
sexually related or drug related. Lots of drugs. Lots of drugs. Slanesh gets off on everything. Extremes in happiness, extremes in sadness, extremes in pain and sadism and masochism. And of course that goes along with the sex part of it as well. It's generally referred to with sex because of the color scheme, very purple, lots
Okay,
of
to be
exposed
fair,
genitalia.
the color scheme would be a good reason to pick Slanesh because, you know, purples and pinks. As you can tell, I am an advocate for purples and pinks, but
A lot of their models have like
I don't know, it
exposed
just seemed
nipples
like
and
the
that
models
is
are
generally the
kind of
theme
nice,
you
but
go
they're not
for from the
amazing, I
physical
guess.
side, but it really embodies everything. Mainly
Gets off on
pain
everything. That
and
sounds
also
familiar.
the
Why do you think I
excessive amount
don't
of
want to be
emotion.
this?
So
Because
when it comes down to it,
I
we find a lot
live
of
the life of Slaneshi as it is. Do you honestly think that I would need to like actually choose Slanesh as my god to not already live that life? I gotta have some diversity in my god choice, you know.
have things like spikes or whips or any kind of BDSM style gear because it is unspeakable excess, the Prince of Pleasure, everything in excess to the point where it is just sheer frightening. That is Slanesh in a nutshell. A little bit bizarre and a little hard to describe sometimes, but as we talk more about the Dark Eldar later in this video, you'll understand it far, far better and far more than you'd want to.
Yes,
And you might be
oh
thinking,
dear,
why
the
would anyone
Eldar
ever
who
want to
oopsied
join
so hard.
Chaos? They all look horrifying, screwed up, and just frightening things.
I
right?
honestly think the
Well,
Chaos
the
are
thing is that, of
incredibly
course,
interesting,
one,
if not a
your
bit fucked
mind
up.
is put into the warp and the materium, so you can be easily swayed by chaos demons when they get into your head, especially if you're a psyker. Sometimes regiments of the less
Okay, so what we
strong
need to
people,
understand
whether it
is
be
that the
civilian-
warp is what happens when when your mother doesn't disconnect your internet after you spent far too long in Fortnite. So, parents out there, if your child has spent 72 hours in Fortnite without bed, then please, for the love of God, disconnect them from the internet, otherwise they will be swayed by the forces of chaos.
or say low-level guardsmen or conscripts can be easily swayed by this and become chaos cultists and stuff, and they serve their dark gods and whatever god they personally refer. However,
Yes,
and
the
this might seem strange,
Imperium,
chaos in
once
their
again,
own right isn't necessarily evil.
the average
See,
Imperial
the warp
Guard,
is every
the average
manifestation of emotion and
warp
being,
bitch,
every soul,
essentially.
everything of existence. This includes all the good things. All the different chaos gods have another side to their coin. Khorne might be death, murder, slaughter, slaughter, but he's also got this weird sense of surprise and honor. Khorne will never lie to you. Khorne will never stab you in the back. Khorne isn't about conniving and
Khorne
scheming.
will never. Ooh, no, wait, that's Disturbed. Sorry, Khorne would never. Or whatever that meme was that they did for their song.
Khorne is about straight up mono, you versus me, get in the ring, we're gonna murder each other hard right now.
Oh,
It may not be a good thing
murder
at the end of the
boner!
day, but it is
Khorne
that
would
other
be
side of
the faction that would be listening to some really hard dark wave death metal.
coin. Him and Zeech generally don't get along because Zeech is that conniving schemer.
Nobody likes
but he's
Zeech.
also about the idea of hope. Where there is change for your predicament. There is change for your problem. The hope of the galaxy, the ability to bend the world to your will, the idea that your fate is not set in stone, but in reality that you control your own destiny and can control it whenever you want. The changer of ways. That is Tzeentch. And of course, Tzeentch and Nurgle hate each other because while Nurgle does represent stagnation, death, and decay, he also represents finality. An ending.
A great Warhammer content creator worth checking out is West Hammer. I think we were watching that guy the other day, actually. You know, it's kind of crazy. This Donathon has made me fall in love with Warhammer more than I have been in years. I've been literally building Warhammer in the midst of this Donathon just to try and satiate my brain from falling into a pit of chaos.
And we will all end the same. We know the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to live and die and rot. And with that, it brings peace of mind. Slaanesh is a lot more simple. While they are
Slaanesh is a lot more simple. Titties. Titties and sucking. Sucking all the suck. It's gonna suck so much suck that your dick will tear from your body. It'll sound like a Henry Hoover on maximum overdrive.
Excess of emotion, they are also the representation of emotion.
Emotion.
Slaanesh
Hey,
embodies
I'm just...
happiness.
Listen.
Slaanesh embodies excitement and joy.
I'm
and
just
pleasure,
saying,
not only in the
I
sense
would do a better
of
job
physical,
of being in charge of Slaanesh than Slaanesh would.
Bam!
Have you
style of
seen
pleasure,
how
but
good
also
I am
everything
at
else, like
subs
food and drink
on Twitch?
and air on your cheek and sunlight, the feeling, emotion and feeling, all of that is also represented with Slaanesh. So you have to ask, why are they always represented as super evil skulls and spikes on everything and want to murder everybody?
That's because they were the Primarchs that
I don't really got
decided
an
to do
answer for you on that
dickhead
one.
things.
My assumption is that because mentally humans may think worse thoughts, even if we don't act on them, and therefore...
Again,
project it
chaos
in the
aren't
world more.
necessarily
That one's a little bit weird. I
evil,
don't know. This
even
is
though
just
they
the
look
bomb right
gnarly
now,
and
but
fucked up.
I don't know,
They're
you
just
need
the
a- you need a
antithesis
super
of
bad
the
guy. You
Imperium.
already got the Imperium,
They're the
but man, you need
Primarchs
somebody
who
to be a little
decided
bit
that
worse than
enough
them.
was enough,
So you got
and
demons.
that
Honestly,
the
who
Emperor
cares? I
ain't
just
so
wanna buy,
hot.
like, a bird
You know,
magician. Look at
they
him.
weren't Emperor's
So cool.
special little
So
boys
combining
anymore,
all
so they
this
decided
together
to
on the
go and
tabletop,
start their
chaos
own
demons are
Imperium
generally very
with their
melee-based.
own
They run in, go really hard.
hookers
You
and
have lots of
blackjack
summoning
and gambling
conjuring, tons of spells.
and
generally a little bit frail, but
tried
they
to
have special
spite
saves
their
to make them a little bit stronger.
OG.
You've got giant demons and smaller demons. You got hordes of little boys and tons of big guys. Demons are as they seem.
Chaos are
Nurgle
also
is
aesthetic as
slow.
hell.
Khorne is super scary in melee. You've got Tzeentch, who are far more into psychers and spellcasting, and then Slaanesh.
Scarborn!
Really, really, really fast.
In fact, we even
squishy,
finished
but
Emperor's
lots of
text-to-speech
hordes
by
and tons of
in the
melee
time we've done this
and
Donathon.
pain damage, of course. So overall, the
by the way, if
demons
you're watching
are
on
a
YouTube, you should totally come
huge
by my
part of
stream.
40K and a massive threat to almost every single faction, with the exception of a couple. However, the big part about demons is also transferred into the other 9 Primarchs we didn't talk about, which are the Chaos Space Marines.
Space Marines!
So Horus and all of his boys, all of them in the Primarchs, they have all also become Chaos Boys, and they all have their own special Chaos
This is what the
legions,
problem is.
specializing in so many different things, just like the Adeptus Astartes, the Angels of Death, the regular Space Marines. Chaos Space Marines aren't a whole lot different than the regular Space
Corruption.
Marines. They have the same armor, generally the same training and toughness. They just specialize in different kinds of things. And also a lot of the Primarchs have ascended into greater is it greater demons? They're demon Primarchs at this point. Gigantic, horrifying man-demon hybrids that are pretty awesome.
And once again, Magnus did nothing wrong.
But them and their associated legions that they are a part of are all kind of going out there
dear.
and causing
To
a large
think,
ruckus for
just
everyone else.
just
Considering the
one
raw
thing, because
strength
poor
and
little
firepower
Magnus
of a legion
wasn't
of
Daddy's
Space
special
Marines,
little boy
imagine
anymore.
an entire legion just converting to chaos and immediately fighting you. It's generally pretty horrifying. There's a lot of them, so I gotta write them down. But you've got the Emperor's Children with Primarch Fulgrim, loyal to Slaanesh. These people, they are some messed up people. They're just sensory overload, tons of drugs, tons
Oh, who
of
are the ones?
torture, And I think Fulgrim
Which was
is
the
a
Chaos
demon
faction
Primarch
that
right now,
is so
and,
bad-mannered
God,
that they
I
scream,
am
"For the
terrified to
Emperor!"
watch those
even
fights.
though they're
At
chaos,
least on the
just to
tabletop,
spite the
because
Emperor.
Emperor's children are not good people. You've got the Iron Warriors, which are kind of like
Rogel
opposite the Imperial
Dawn's
Fists,
adversaries.
Primarch Perturabo, I believe is his name. They're Chaos Undivided. They just kind of serve Chaos in a general aspect instead of choosing one of the four. But the Iron Warriors are big on the siege and fortification. And they're
Rogel
basically
Dawn does not
entirely
like these
against the
guys.
Imperial Fists and their major rival. Perturabo, I believe, is also still alive, and I'm also very interested to see what he looks like, because Demon Primarchs are badass. You've got the Night Lords with Primarch Conrad Kurz. Conrad Kurz is dead, which is good, because he's a sick fuck. But the Night Lords are generally about terrorizing people, and terrorism. They're generally about fear. And
Seems like a pretty
dark.
cool
So,
bunch
you've got
of
the
dudes to
World
hang out
Eaters
with then.
Primarch Angron,
So,
still
basically,
alive, also
XQC
excited to
fans.
see. Angron. If you think you
Ooh, Angron! I've read a book about
is the
Angron.
angriest son of a bitch you will ever know. Angron removed parts of his brain that didn't make him angry, so he could be angrier. Angron.
That's
Fuck
like
is
me
mad.
surgically
You've got the
removing
Death Guard
parts of
with
my brain
Primarch
to fit in
Mortarion.
more
They actually have their own
space for
special
titty.
codex and their own major army on the tabletop. Mortarion himself is.
Oh,
actually
look
one
how
of the
cool
models,
that is!
and
See,
look at
this
him.
is why
Look
people
at
play
him.
Chaos.
It's so cool.
This is why people play Chaos. One thing that I will say about Games Workshop, sure, their stuff might be expensive. Sure, Games Workshop might be doing really bad moves for their community. But you can't deny that their models look absolutely sick. Like, these things look fucking amazing. Even if you don't play Warhammer, just buying these to paint them and build them is a satisfying thing. And that's it's entirely why I've been buying orcs. It's not just because I really, really like big, butch, manly things that look like they could bend me over. And what? Anyway.
Cool looking. Of course, Nurgle based, obviously. So very slow, but very tanky. You've got the Word Bearers with Primarch Lorgar. Lorgar is, I believe, still alive. I don't know what's up with him at the current moment, but the Word Bearers are generally the people who caused all the major problems in the beginning. At least I blame them for it. They're a little
Well,
assholes.
Zega, that's
You got
why
the
my
Black
orcs
Legion
are being
with
painted
Primarch
purple.
Horus.
My orcs are going to be the Makari's boys because they're infected by Makari.
Alfarius Omegon.
And you'll never see them coming
Chaos.
because nobody's ever seen a purple orc.
I think. And then finally, you've got the Thousand Sons with Primarch Magnus the Nerd. Thousand Sons also have their own book, just with the Death Guard.
Magnus the
is
Nerd.
also a
There he
tabletop.
is! Look at that model! Look how cool that is! But it's okay, because he never did anything wrong.
Model. He looks super cool, as you can tell, and they're all super heavily Psyker and kind of Egyptian themed. They look pretty neat. But overall, with all of these Chaos Space Marine factions, you can play as a lot of different ones, but the main ones that you can really work at are standard Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, as well as the Death Guard and Thousand Sons, as they are the most fleshed out, especially on the tabletop at least. See this right here? This is a really good way to describe the Chaos Space Marines. What the thick-headed fools with their broken corpse of an emperor fail to understand is that not only can they never defeat us, but they cannot hide or flee or shield themselves from the triumph of chaos. They are finite and we are unbound, undivided. They must not err, or they shall fall to heresy. All who fall join our cause.
So that's the thing, right? The more zealoty the Imperium becomes, the easier it is to fall to chaos, because the expectation of you to be this bastion of the Emperor is so high that I think the analogy is the higher you stand, the further the fall will be.
We are them, but freed from the shackles of ignorance. We are them, grown strong, evolved. We are them, but so much more. As hardcore,
it's kind of why you got to find a neutral. It's kind of this whole element of how
Chaos
religion bad. You know what I mean?
You could probably get rid of Space Marines a decent amount, the Chaos Space Marines that is, but every soul that dies goes to the warp. Every Chaos soul will end up back in the warp. And depending on how hard you killed them, they will come back at some point. Every demon you banish will return at some point. Chaos is unstoppable. The warp is unending. And while maybe there is at some point some way to stop them somehow,
At the point in the story,
resources
no.
to do so, the requirements to do so are so far beyond the reach.
This is why the Emperor needs to come back and slap chaos up a little bit.
That really, it's just an unstoppable force that just.
Kind of why I've been really liking the whole Emperor's text-to-speech thing. Sure, it's satire. Sure, it's not canon. Sure, it's a bit nonsensical. But at least it makes sense of the narrative a bit better. And it helps you understand that the Emperor is this...
So,
like, even though Chaos are technically way stronger than the Imperium, if the Emperor were to ever come back, you damn well know that every other faction are gonna get a slap. Real hard. Like, considering the Emperor of Mankind has been basically all given dead for the last several decades, several centuries, considering that... the Imperium is still doing a really good job. Ah! Now, please, nobody else raid. Do you have any idea how hard this is going to be to edit in the cutting room floor to try and figure out where these raids were? And to try and edit it all out so that it all becomes one cohesive narrative rather than a mess?
I'm gonna come.
I appreciate it, though. Let's keep watching.
We're done with humans now. Let's talk about some Xenos.
Ugh, Eldar. Blech. Okay.
So let's talk about the Eldar, or also known as the Eldari.
Why did you just write a note for a timestamp?
Hyper-specialized.
You're asking somebody who has the worst burnout ever
people.
conceived
They
by a
were, as
content
well,
creator. Somebody who's been live
responsible
for
the
62
creation
days
of
to
Slanesh,
have
the
a
demon
cognitive
god.
awareness
Do that?
enough to write something down
Debauchery,
and not be scatterbrained.
World-ending.
Yeah, good
scale.
luck with that.
So back in the day, it was just Korn, Zeech, and Nurgle. And
How you
the
doing, little Wolfie?
Eldar
How you doing,
are
Marin?
Very, very ancient.
Hi, Gleaming.
Millions of years. These Eldar, however,
Guys, please go
have
follow
a
these
bit of
amazing
a
content creators.
sensory problem. You know, every kind of pain or
So it's
feeling that you have.
literally, other than that, if Tau didn't exist, Eldar would be the Tau. These guys are the nerds of the webway.
A bit amplified compared to the normal. However, with Eldar, as their race advanced so excessively, and they became so self-reliant, and everything became so easy.
Also,
there
this
was
is
no
the faction that
requirement
fucked
for
themselves
food
to death.
production anymore. There was no
Literally.
shortages. Everything was basically
Man,
done.
I wish I could have been
Everyone
an
was
Eldar
so
when that happened.
comfortable. And that comfort breeded this weird sedation.
Bread!
That sedation
It's bread,
breeded the
Bricky!
requirement for
Get
more
your
and
pronunciation
more
right, you motherfucker!
Debauchery! Debauchery!
When everything you have can be so easily acquired, you will end up down this road of pure debauchery. All of the senses
Debauchery.
the Eldar had that were so powerful, things like
So me.
feeling, happiness,
At the end of the day,
sadness,
all
and
these
just
factions
evil
end
and
up being
good,
me.
all needed to be satisfied and satiated. And the desire to satiate these senses grew more and more with worse and worse debauchery. It started off with things like sex and drugs. becoming so
Haha,
much more
basic bitch
rampant
stuff.
Because these are the first things you generally turn to when requirements for living are so easily accessible. It would get to the point that made
So,
Sandra
what I'm
Cullen
hearing
in
is that the
BioShock
Eldar was like
insane.
living in the UK
All right,
in the
this is kind of
1800s.
debauchery it
Cool.
led to. It was constantly satisfying and satiating these sexual and sadistic or
that's kinda
masochistic
small.
fantasies that only elevated and elevated. And this was
Yikes.
species-wide. People started going down darker, more depraved,
This is what
and
happens.
more
wh-
violent
Okay,
paths.
there's a really good analogy for this. And I love the fact that I get to make this analogy again. Furries. Allow me to explain. So, you're a furry, right? Or just like maybe an internet artist enjoyer in general. And you start down this rabbit hole. You commission a... Fuck me! Stop raiding me! Makari's complaining about being raided. Makari's complaining about having donations done to them. Listen, I appreciate it. I really do. But you know, this is all being recorded for a YouTube video. This is... You know, it's fine. It's fine. Tiger? Tiger.
Custodies, I will do this day.
If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to apologize, because this might seem a little bit sporadically edited. And to that, I'm just... You know, I'm not going to explain it. I'm just going to let things run.
World Eldar. They left on these giant continent-sized
I'm not going to explain why the editing in this is so
they
weird.
believed in learning
Chat has the
old
responsibility
ways
for
of the
this.
Eldar
Chat,
and
I
pushing
hope you're
away
sorry. You
from the
apologize to
depravity
YouTube right
of
now.
factory and going
You
back to their
apologize
main
right now to
roots. And
YouTube.
so they would segment themselves on these giant craft worlds far in the outer reaches of space. They even had this thing called the Webway. Remember what we mentioned about warp travel with the
Oh
Imperium?
yes, that
With
thing!
Eldar,
The
it's
thing that the
way
Eldar seem to
safer
really
on the
enjoy, that the
Webway.
Emperor
Eldar
technically
Webway
started
is
working
actually
with, and
like a
then
pocket
the Eldar were like,
dimension
ha ha ha,
kind of
ours
thing.
now.
And in that pocket dimension, there were also more horrible, depraved groups and clans that would spend their time in there.
Oh yeah, I was
And
trying to make
can
an
you imagine
analogy about how
debauchery's bad
the
already?
Eldar are
There's
basically the
debauchery
internet dwellers. How you
So
commission,
all of this
how you start by
continued,
commissioning
and it
something,
continued,
and it's
and
like
it
this really
bloated
innocent, like, oh, please
until
draw my anime waifu in a sexy
Slaanesh
bikini,
just
and then you get
burst
desensitized to
all
that,
that
and it's all of a sudden,
emotion,
okay, now
all
draw her
that
with big
mental,
tits, and then you get desensitized to that, and now it's like,
processes,
oh, draw her with big
all of
ass
this in
and
such
big
a
tits,
condensed
and then you get
space.
desensitized
Don't
to that,
forget
so you
this is
ask her to
all
be
being
drawn with big ass,
shot.
big tits, and a
All their
dick,
souls
and then
as
you get
well
desensitized to
into
that, so
the
then you
warp.
give her dick
All
nipples
of this
and multiple
depravity
dicks and
right into the
tits
warp.
the size of
So
planets, and
what
then you get
happened?
desensitized to
Boom.
that, and the next thing you know,
Slaanesh
you've got a
was
triple
birthed
dick-nippled
and
centaur with
killed
rotary
off
blades and sword in its back, and that's the
90%
only thing you
of
can get
the
off to because you've been
entire Eldar
desensitized to everything
population.
else.
Untold trillions.
Furries.
Trillions had their souls ripped from their bodies and their actual fleshy bodies devoured by Slaanesh demons.
Stop
The
calling out your
entirety of
audience.
the Eldar
I
race
can't
was
help it.
eaten alive and their souls consumed to the Prince of Pleasure. All of them got fucked up. It was so bad that it literally ripped a warp hole into the fabric of the materium called the Eye of Terror. That's literally
Oh,
this, like,
that's what that is.
quasi-horrifying gateway
always wondered what the
portal
Eye of Terror was.
from the materium and the immaterium right next to Cadia. And it is horrifying.
Oh god,
So
Cadia.
this Slaanesh, also known as She Who Thirsts by the Eldar, slaughtered the entire population except for a
Absolutely.
couple. Those in the craft worlds were actually not affected.
Oh,
by this,
these
as they
ships,
were so
you know what the
far
Eldar
removed
remind me
from
of?
the
They remind me of
galaxy.
the,
that crazy crack.
the
that
Corians
birthed
from
Slaanesh
Mass Effect.
Only affected the ones
Very
in the
similar
center.
mythos.
So these craft world Eldar were able to escape, but Slaanesh got their sights on
That's all
them.
fine, Tia. That's all fine.
Every time an Eldar will die, their soul doesn't just pass into the warp naturally. It goes straight to Slaanesh, craft world or not. What about those people in the Webway? Well, imagine that giant birth happening, but they were
Man,
only able
the
to
Eldar
just
are such a pox on
barely
the
get a
galaxy, and
grasp
at least
on
the Tau
was just
have that
barely
self-designation
able
of
to
being
hold on.
cringe. At least
These
when they
people
die, they
are
don't
the
go
Dark
straight to
Eldar,
Slaanesh
or
and
also
power
known
the
as
chaos.
Makari. The Eldar population right now is so massively small. It is minuscule compared to any of the other most of the other populations in the universe. The Eldar are consistently having issues trying to get their population up because as their souls are constantly being hungered from Slaanesh, they realize their entire species is doomed.
Yep.
And they understand
Even though,
very
actually,
well.
since
Since
this
the
video was
time of
launched,
the
there's some
fall,
lore that's
our
come out
race has
saying
been
that they've
haunted
actually
by what we,
stabilized.
in our
Like, the
reckless
Eldar have actually
pursuit
managed to
of
stabilize
hedonistic
themselves somewhat in their own
indulgence gave
craft
birth to.
carriers.
Though our dreams once overturned worlds and quenched suns, we are now but
I do like
fitful
how
shadows clinging to the edge of
The
existence.
Warhammer universe
All the
doesn't progress
stars in the
itself that
sky
often,
cannot
but when
blot
it
out the
does,
hateful glare of
there's
the
usually
red
good and
moon's
bad shit for
eye.
every faction.
The birthing place of the
Unless
great
you're
enemy
the Imperium,
pulses
when it's
with
only
all
bad.
The malice of a demon that is dreaming, casting its shadow.
Oh, Amelia!
Twisted strand of fate and casting of the runes leads me to this time, to this place, and it is clear that the final battle awaits me at the ancient Crone worlds, a conflict the likes of which has not been seen since the Mon'khei warred amongst themselves and their corpse of a seer fell to his traitorous son. is coming, and all my steps lead towards it, no matter that I walk other paths. I see the stars stained red with the blood of the Mon'khei, and though their wars do not concern me, I would gladly let them destroy one another. I know that to avoid this fight is to condemn my race to inevitable doom, and though all I see is darkness, I know that I will not
Man, this is some
flinch
edgy
from
fan
my
fiction.
destiny. And now let's talk about cute plastic models.
Bro, I'm straight up not having a good time.
The first playable race we have for
I mean,
the Eldar
you gotta
are the
feel a
craft
little bit sorry for the
Eldar,
Eldar.
and
They
the
have had some
Eldar
really
that
rough
I
times
mentioned
with it, even
earlier.
though
And
it's
each of
mostly
them have their own
self-induced.
kind of craft world, almost like a Space Marine.
They do look kind of cool though.
Craft
They're
world
basically
is
the
in
anime
itself
dudes of
its own
Warhammer.
Special kind of group. And the Eldar themselves are very fast and rely a lot on trickery. They are squishy, a bit weak, but they're very in tune as psychers. Tons of psychers across the entire Eldar population, and their weaponry and abilities are fast and extremely hard-hitting, but of course rather fragile. Understanding an Eldar's brain is an exercise in futility. They are all
Fuck
over
the
place
Eldar.
in
I mean, yeah, to be
confusion
fair.
and trickery on a whole galactic scale. They fight weird, they think weirder, and Eldar, in their own right, really rely on this to keep their species alive. They need to think about deception and the
At that point,
strangeness
when you
of
just
what they
acknowledge
do
that
if
you're
they
kind of
truly want
screwed.
to not be
Why
immediately
bother
murdered and
fighting?
slaughtered
Just
wholesale
lay
against
down,
their
let
entirely small
Slanesh take
population.
you,
However,
and just
I must
realize
say that
your
it seems like
life
their
and service is
population
going to be
is
better
getting slightly
suited for
better.
someone
These
else.
craft worlds hold millions upon millions of people, and as they continually, reproduce and have their craft worlds expand, losing a few people in battle, while hurts a lot, they aren't really losing what's extremely precious to them. It's not like every single death means the death of their species. It seems like they're kind of on the upturn a little bit. They're still a doomed race being sucked into Slanesh every time someone dies, but they are definitely doing a little bit better than they were before. Eldar are
Yeah,
fast, cunning,
that's kind of what I was
and when
meaning,
they
right? The
don't make
Eldar,
up for
they've kind of
inconvenience, they make up
been
for in truly
resurgencing
advanced
themselves a little
weaponry.
bit, which is
They also
nice,
call
but
humans Mon'khei, which is something I mentioned earlier. That is a derogatory slur for humans. in
I know
the
what
Warhammer
Mon'khei
world.
means.
Why
Mon'khei is
it
not a
called
monkey.
Mon'khei? Well, it's because you can't, in your game, call people monkeys.
Nah, that's not why, actually. I know something that Bricky doesn't. Okay, so Mon'khei. Mon'khei were a race of very vicious creature that the Eldar ran into. And the Eldar were actually so scared of the Mon'khei. I was like, these Mon'khei, the original Mon'khei that the Eldar ran into, they were brainless, but they were stupidly powerful. And they really did do a number against the Eldar.
If it makes you feel any better, Esker would have raided you too, but he has no idea how to do so. That is all, LOL.
So the Eldar named the humans Mon'khei because they basically consider the Mon'khei and humans to be very similar. No brains, very stupid, but also very aggressive. And I suppose maybe that's Games Workshop's excuse as to why they don't just call them monkeys. Thank you for the resub, Ballas.
That's what I said. Not very tanky.
It's your birthday?
Generally pretty
Yo,
squishy.
chat, can we get some
Hit
Phil's birthdays for Ballas,
trucks
please?
And move at Mach 5. Fast, hit hard, die fast. Exactly how it sounds. They've been good for a very long time, too. We bring only death and leave only chaos.
Are they wrong? No,
This
they're not.
message, even a human can
Like,
understand.
mankind in the Warhammer universe are a
Eldar.
bunch of
So,
real big
Drukhari.
dicks.
Let's talk about the Dark Eldar.
Ah,
On today's episode of How Fucked Up Is Fucked Up.
yes.
Fucked up.
So
The
those
other
come
badasses.
from the webway.
Ah, thank you for the resub as well, Octavia.
And the depraved people of the Eldar. In the webway, they didn't
the
quite
webway's
get
crazy.
a hold onto them. Slanesh has them, but it has them on by the pinky finger. And they're slowly being consumed by Slanesh, but they found out they can stave her off by doing Slanesh things. The Dark Eldar are by far
The Dark Eldar
worst,
are
most
fucked
horrifying,
up. I've done a lot of research into
disgusting,
these guys.
Depraved and brutal race in
They
all
basically,
of
it's basically
Warhammer
what happens
40K.
when you
These
allow
are
your
entirely a group of people whose full purpose
DeviantArt
to
fan
save
fiction
their
to
species from
manifest into real
extinction,
life.
to go into planets, raid them, and take as many slaves as they possibly can to torture them for 1, 5, 10, 20, a million years, because that torture will keep them from dying. They look very BDSM style too. They definitely have a lot more spiky bits, and they have a lot more of that kind of
Most of
leathery,
the
black
Dark
look
Eldar's
to them.
covers
But
would work
let's-
really well as a death
let's
metal
say you are an
band's
upstanding imperial
album cover.
citizen, living life on a regular planet. You get invaded by the Necrons. The Necrons will shoot you with a deatomizer, and you will be destroyed in a millisecond, and that's it. Not the worst way to go. You are invaded by Chaos Marines or something. You take a bolter shot to the head or a chain sword across your stomach, and you get cut in half. Painful, but not the worst. The orcs arrive. They beat you to death. Hurts, but
Where's the
Tyranids,
orcs?
they
And where's
survive.
the best?
Rough. The Dark Eldar. The Dark
Oh, boy.
Eldar. This is going to get a little graphic. I apologize.
Oh my God, Bricky.
You pray you die. You don't. You are instead taken as a human slave. Your life will be endless work and agony, 24/7. They will make sure you can't not die, as your pain satisfies them. They will hook you up to all manner of torture devices. They
I mean,
will
to be fair,
inject
if you end up being,
pain-based,
even if you
like,
are Dark
stimuli
Eldar, there's a high
drugs
probability you
directly
might end up
into
as a
your
slave
nervous
to
system.
another
They
Dark
will
Eldar. So
slowly
even
run
being
razor
Dark
blades
Eldar doesn't
across
escape you
your
the fact
skin.
that you might end
They
up
will
suffering
fillet you
religiously.
and just pull out your teeth and your fingernails one by one. They will remove your appendages and your skin and wait for it to grow back so they can do it again. They will murder and torture and use the R word, it rhymes with grape, your entire family in front of you and do the exact same
Jeez.
thing to them. You yourself will also be rhymes with grape anywhere and everywhere possible. And this will occur for 20 years until you are no longer satisfying to them. And then you will be contorted
Deck Talk, thank you for the follow.
and twisted.
Yeah, the Dark
into some
Eldar are kind of
form
fucked up.
Trophy. A
It's like they had a
fleshy
group of
trophy
people
or
in
a ring
GW who had to
or a
write up
pouch
the lore
or a
for certain
TV
factions,
stand.
and
Or
little
perhaps a
Eddie,
wonderful hat
little Eddie,
while
the
you are, of
dude who had a
course, still
psychotic
alive
trip, was the
and
person they
breathing.
put in charge of the
And
Dark
you will
Eldar.
become a moaning, fleshy trophy for eternity. And that is what happens when you are taken by the Dark Eldar. They are the most depraved, most horrifying race in all of 40k. They look the part, and they do it so they all don't die. They are literally forced to do this, because if they don't, Slaanesha's
As we
grip
saw in
will get
Emperor's
harder,
text-to-speech.
and they will have their
Even the
souls
slightest
pulled
bit of
away.
nicety, and all of a
So long as
sudden
they
they're
keep
like,
doing this,
"Oh,
Slaanesh is
my
like,
head is falling
"You're
off my
doing good,
body."
Man. You're doing solid. You keep that shit up, you elf-eared bastards. That's the Dark Eldar. That's the Drukhari. They are horrible. On the tabletop, they're actually kind of like Eldar, but more extreme. They are even squishier than the Eldar, but they hit generally even harder. Fast attacks,
And they shoot
skirmishers, really
mini
quick
black holes.
speed,
I had a
like, get around
friend who
them,
was
do a lot
Dark
of damage, get
Eldar,
away kind
and
of
for whatever
stuff.
reason,
That's
he
mostly
didn't
Dark
understand that
Eldar.
as Dark
Look at the
Eldar, you need to be
definition of
fast and
grimdark in the
maneuverable. So
dictionary,
the
you'll
dude
find a
literally
picture of Dark
charges
Eldar.
all his units into
And
my Space Marines
Sev.
and dies, surprisingly.
A quote from Mr. Vecht. "We are the lords of despair, masters of terror, dread and agony
Thank you for
are
that scam
our
train, by the
meat
way.
and wine, and they are plentiful indeed." Dark Eldar. Let's talk about the Harlequins.
Ah, clowns!
What's the matter, Andy? Don't you want to have some fun?
Bazinga!
Harlequins are a bizarre race of Eldar.
Hope y'all
They're
like clowns.
Demonic clown performers. They're like a weird mix of
Harlequins.
Sander Cohen from BioShock and Jin from League of Legends, but in a more clown theme. They're
Y'all want
artists
some
of
Clussy?
death and perfecters of their craft. They do not belong to Craft Worlds or any of the weird Drukhari people. They guard something called the Black Library, which is this giant tome of never-ending knowledge deep in the heart of the
Don't bug
Eldar
me.
Webway, and also guarded by their god named Kegorok, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He is the laughing god, but it's the Eldar's laughing god, and these are the Harlequins, the Harlequin clowns. These are Eldar clowns, okay? So imagine the things that an
Someone at
Eldar,
GW had to bullshit why they were
these
searching their
depraved
favorite tag.
individuals would find funny. And this is the god of that. It's a horror clown. These are gods of horror for us normal people. For them, they're like, oh, it's so funny. They're all dying horribly.
Why am I getting this like sneaking suspicion that most of the factions in GW are basically there to satiate someone's weird kink?
But their main thing is guarding that black library, and the Harlequins.
I'm getting a bit of a vibe of that. I don't know about you guys.
They're demon clown performers. They're barely any models on the tabletop. They're good in melee. They're demon clowns. I'm not sure. I got a quote. It is too easy for an Eldar to embrace the obscene virtues of chaos, for Slaanesh is nothing more than a manifestation of the Eldar mind.
How does one become a Harlequin?
Form. Human
because if you're Eldar, you're struggling to stay alive as it is without falling to Slaanesh. And if you're Dark Eldar, you're so satiated with your murder boner that you never really considered laughter in the first place. So how the hell did you become a Harlequin at that point?
Are virtues that can be expressed in bloodshed just as easily as in song. To an unfettered Eldar mind, there is neither sanity nor madness, but merely a wave of perfect existence fulfilled by its own.
Not gonna lie, I kind of like the Harlequins aesthetic,
They're very
though.
strange. The Harlequins, Drukhari, Eldar.
I can imagine these guys would be amazing to play as a D&D character.
Seem completely easy to understand.
And after killing you, I honk my nose with religious fervitude.
To horrifying murder and also clowns. They're all over the place, but honestly, they represent quite well and are rather interesting, especially with the whole Slaanesh murdering everyone bit. So, yeah, Eldar. Now,
Orcs.
Bugs.
Ma, they following me, Ma.
Starship Troopers! Do you want to know more?
The bug.
The Tyranids. Now, you want to talk something a lot more
the
fun,
one faction that might be able to put orcs to shame.
Eldar shenanigans. Let's talk the Tyranids. They're bugs.
Let's face it, if orcs and Tyranids were to go to war with each other, they might actually cancel each other out.
They were actually
but who's
supposed to
yes, this, because Warhammer originally, StarCraft originally was supposed to be 40k, and the Tyranids were meant to be the Zerg, and the Eldar were meant to be the Protoss, and then
I don't know. You really fucked up on that one, Games Workshop, didn't ya? Tyranids are a giant infestation of unfathomable proportions. These are giant, extremely bio-advanced hive mind organisms that are basically all about absorbing as much biomass as they possibly can to evolve and mutate to be extremely.
He has the StarCraft 2 theme in the background. Oh, the 6,000 hours I have in StarCraft 2. I recognize that within an instant.
Potent and powerful and kill and eat anything in their path. They are probably the least evil faction in all of 40k because all they want to do is eat shit. They want to nom nom the entire galaxy. Angry and
the Octarius War.
Also,
I mean, yeah, true, but we need to see like an actual full-on all the orcs versus all the Tyranids. Because let's face it, if you had all the orcs, if you had all the orcs versus all the humans, orcs win. If you had all the Tyranids versus all the humans, Tyranids win. The only reason the other races have ever stood a chance against the Tyranids is because you usually sacrifice some insatiably large weapon to just hinder them. Same with the orcs in that respect. You can't really fight them. You're just trying to hinder them as best you can. Again, it's why the Emperor of Mankind needs to come back to slap them around a little bit.
Called the Shadow in the Warp specifically, where when they are coming in to invade a planet, they have this weird ability to kind of cut off the warp on all the psychers on that planet. And how do you get help across the stars? Well, you need the warp, because you need that for interstellar travel. So with people unable to call for help from the Tyranids, these are just easy pickings. And an entire giant Tyranid hive fleet comes out of orbit and just will massacre, absorbing all that biomass and turning them and all of their other Tyranids into
I do like me. If you couldn't tell, I was a Zerg main in StarCraft 2.
What is important.
Which is kind of weird considering I don't play Tyranids. I collect orcs instead.
And having little dudes eat people up, to the Hormagons, Termagants, and Gene Stealers, all the way to the Hive Guard and the Exocrines and the Swarm Lord, to Hive Tyrants and their giant battle fleets, and even something as crazy as the Hierophant Bio Titan. The Tyranid
God Bug from Starship Troopers.
come in all forms and sizes depending on what they require. They are extremely good at anti-biological weaponry. There is no way you can plague them or blight them. They have extremely strong armor,
And
carapaces
adaptation.
and such.
Even when
Tyranids
Imperium
nigh
did try and use
perfect
biological
organisms
weapons on them, they
and
just
are
adapted
pretty
to it and was like,
spooky when it comes
that was
down to
cute.
how
Now
they
we're immune to
handle
it.
all of their genetic material. Keep feeding them, they'll keep evolving. They keep on creating new horrifying organisms to spread across the galaxy. And you want to know what the most
Necrons.
terrifying
Honestly,
part of the
Necrons are
Tyranids
kind of
is?
cool. I was collecting
We might be
Necrons for a while, but then I realized I was more of an
There have
orc
been around
person.
6 or 7 Tyranid hive fleets. Behemoth, Kronos, all these
Which
different
kind of
kinds
makes you
hive
wonder,
fleets,
where did
and
the
they've
Tyranids
all
come from?
arrived in the galaxy from different points. Different sections of the Milky Way galaxy have had different Tyranids come through. And that is horrifying, because as far as we know, we could just be surrounded on all sides by Tyranids.
See, I honestly think that, Necrons are kind of scary. Like, all these other factions are kind of scary. But the Tyranids? They didn't even start in our galaxy. They've come from all across the Milky Way. Which really makes you realize they've done what the Imperium has been trying to do for millennia. And now they're just coming to us. Tyranids really feel like if there was an overarching villain within the Warhammer universe, I feel like it would kind of be the Tyranids.
The only reason you may not hear a whole lot about Tyranids is because it's a little bit hard to have a bunch of story off of one hive mind genocidal monsters. All these giant bugs swarming in, killing and eating everybody and evolving. I mean, as cool as there are some cool characters, the Swarm Lord, Old One-Eye, you can't really have a whole bunch of major character-based stories around them. As awesome as they are, they're simple. They want to eat you. They want to eat you and absorb your biomass. They are simple bugs. If you want something a little more complex, talk gene stealer cults.
Ah,
All
yes,
the pot
the
I
gene
want, I
stealers.
get around faster than walking, and wherever I need a seat, I can just sit on my balls.
Gene stealer cults are a special brand of Tyranid that can slowly infect themselves into different kinds of society. And by infecting them, they can rise up to where they all prey.
See, this is what this would be the infested Terran units from StarCraft 2. I thought these things were so cool. I have a slight I have a slight interest for this whole like corruption kind of thing. So having the whole infested Terran kind of thing is so cool.
And these are called gene stealer cults. An entire hive world of the Imperium can be turned into nothing but servants of the Tyranid masters just by infecting them and screwing with their genetic code.
It's at this point, we haven't even covered the Necrons or the Tau or the Orcs. How in God's green earth, and I think I said this in the first video, how in God's green earth is anything alive in this universe with all this fuckery going on? Like, seriously. Like, you think the Empire of Mankind was really strong, and then you realize that even with the God Emperor on their side, the Empire of Mankind have just been a punching bag for everything else out there.
A little bit. They also have this cool, like, Mad Max look, which is really neat. They are definitely one of the bigger threats to the Imperium besides Chaos. I keep saying biggest threat to the Imperium. They're up there, though, because you
Thank you for those
did
biddies.
stepped on a bug in middle school.
Let's not forget the
There is a
fact that the
cancer
Tyranids
eating
are
at the
fleeing something
Imperium.
worse.
With each decade,
Wait, really?
it advances deeper, leaving drained, dead worlds in its wake. This horror, this abomination,
Which
has
makes you
thought
wonder,
and
maybe
purpose that
eventually
functions on an
GW gonna release this
unimaginable
overarching
galactic
evil,
scale.
and then
all we can
all
do
the
is to
factions
try to
band
stop
together
the
to fight this
swarms
one
of
major evil.
bioengineer monsters
Probably
that
not,
leeches
but,
upon
you know,
us by
we can
instinct.
hope.
We have
Maybe
given
one
the
day
horror a
GW will
name
get
to
their
salvage our
narrative in
fears.
order to a
We
point where it
call
actually
the
makes sense.
Tyranid race. But if it is aware of us, it must know us as nothing but prey. Tyranids, they're cool. But are they as cool as the orcs?
No! Nothing's as good as the Orcs. We's the Orcs, and we's the best. We's gonna show them humans what you gotta get when you mess with the Orcs.
I'm super fast.
Orcs, 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 orcs,
Orcs, orcs, orcs, orcs, orcs,
Love
orcs, orcs, orcs.
So, yes, the green monsters, the green tide, the green skins.
Yes,
These
Shy Guy, I
orcs,
realize
they
we're
are, in fact,
expecting a
race
lot
in 40k.
Ips by saying
the
that.
orcs are as exactly what you expect them. They have archaic weapons, they're big boys, they have axes, and they have got big old teeth, and they want to kill everything, and there are so
The
many
orcs, the
of
ones who can
them.
literally
The only reason they haven't
believe
taken over the entire
in something
galaxy
and
is
it
they can't stop
happens. The
murdering each
power of
other.
imagination.
Orcs are so
Oh,
cool.
what's that?
Orcs
Our
don't
car
have
ran out of fuel?
philosophy.
Oh, well,
Orcs
if I
don't have
use my
existential
imagination
crisis.
and
What
believe
matters
that
is
it's
who's
full
the
of
biggest orc.
gas,
You listen
we
to
can
that
start
guy,
it going.
'cause he the biggest orc. He big orc knows best. You win through the power of imagination. Of all the races I have battled throughout the galaxy, the orc is
power of
the
the
hardest
war.
to comprehend. They wage war with machines that should not work, care little for strategic gains, and are just as likely to slaughter each other as the enemy. How does one battle an enemy that defies
They're also a
all
fungus.
logic? As an orc, you're enjoying life. You're enjoying the life you're given. Your whole life and job and purpose is to get up and beat each other to death because you can. The biggest orc is the man who understands everything. He is the boss. And orcs have this really weird, like, big, dumb, stereotype British accent,
There's one
which
story
is
that
just
I heard from the
hilarious to me.
orcs which
Those
absolutely
are
tickles my
orcs.
fancy.
You fight.
There's
You like to fight.
there was
Your
an
whole
orc
purpose
war
is to
boss
fight. You
who
wage war 'cause you
somehow
want
managed to
wage
get
war.
his
You
entire
got your
war
boss
band
over there, and you
into
better
the
listen to the
war
boss, 'cause if you don't listen
to
the
fight
boss,
a
the boss will
chaos
squish you and
god.
make you an example for the other orcs.
And the
then you
chaos
can't fight
god,
'cause
after
orc
days
dead.
and days of
Orc dead
battling,
is- orc dead
beat
can't fight
them.
'cause
But the
orc
chaos
dead.
god
Orcs,
enjoyed the fight
they
so
scrap
much
together machines
that
out
he
of
keeps
parts that
bringing
don't make
back
any
the
sense,
orc
and
war boss
because
and
they
his entire
believe
war
they
band
have the
every
mental
day
imagination
just
that
so they can start
machine
fighting
will
again.
run, it'll run. If that machine's out of gas, you're driving that
Nirvana
machine
for
with
the
your fellow
orcs.
orcs, and the biggest orc is behind the wheel, and you run out of gas, some orc behind you like, oh, Zog, we're out of gas. And the big orc is like, no, we're not. I filled the fucking gas
See
tank
what I
up
mean?
earlier. And all the other orcs are like, oh yeah, you did do that. And then you turn the fucking mech back on, and it works again. Does it have gas? Probably not, but it works.
With the power of the war.
imagination. They paint things red because it makes them think they goes faster. They paint things purple because it's the sneakiest color. You want to know why? You ever seen a purple orc? Didn't fucking think so. Orcs are also like ancient as hell. They're back in the Eldari time frame.
Crocs.
But back then they were called Crocs, and they were much larger and scarier and far more intelligent. Now they're just orcs, and they're big, dumb, and they smack things. But they're pretty spooky. They're not very well armored, but they hit really hard, and it's called the Green Tide because there are so many orcs. There are about as many orcs as there are Tyranids.
For every one orc, there's one brain cell for Makari. It's why I'm so smart.
Maybe more. Who knows? But they keep on, murdering each other, so it's not too bad of an issue. Orcs are entirely comic relief. Their stuff is slapped together. That makes no sense. Their vehicles don't work the way they're supposed to, but they work because they think it works, because they imagine that it works. Orcs care only about who is the biggest orc.
It's all well and good being captured by the Eldar or infested by a Tyranid, but even in those situations, at least you can thank the maker that you're not a Gretchen. There is no fate in existence worse than being born a Gretchen.
And they will follow the biggest orc. And then if they want to be the biggest orc, they'll challenge the biggest orc. And then when they go and they issue a wa is just war in orc, they murder everybody and everything in this giant tide of green orcs who are just excited to be hitting something. They don't care that they're hitting Eldar or the Imperium or Tau or anyone in between. They're just so they get to beat shit up.
Hell yeah!
And on the tabletop, they are a total coin flip, and they're really fun. I
remember playing Warhammer Fantasy back in the day, and a guy that I was fighting who collected orcs,
a bad guy or that
he
guy.
killed more of his
Orc players
own
have this
team
kind
than
of
I
fun
did,
to them because
and
when
that
you
was
play them,
hilarious.
you are completely
Also proved how
submitting yourself
weak
to
Tomb
RNG.
Kings were.
So here's the thing. Guardsmen, Imperial Guardsmen, when they shoot, they roll a dice, and on a 4 up, they'll hit their target. They have a 50% chance. Space Marines, pretty good. They hit on a 3 or higher because they're well trained. Adeptus Custodians, they hit on 2s because they're just super well trained. Orcs, they hit on a 5 or higher. But if they roll a 6, they get to make another shot with anything. from the dinkiest pistol to the biggest rocket launcher. It doesn't matter. Half of their stuff will blow up on a whim. One of their medics, if you roll a 1 to heal someone, you fuck up your surgery and you just kill an orc. They're so wacky and silly.
I love that. That's why I collect orcs.
You roll high.
I find
and
it
you
funny
keep
that because
going
they're
high,
fungus
you are
based,
going to
if you cut the head off one orc, you can
people.
surgically
And if
implant
you
it onto
don't,
another orc's body
you
and it'll
lose.
work.
I mean, that's what you get when you play orcs. That's what happens when you play orc. It's a coin flip, which is why you can't be a salty bitch when you play orcs, because things won't go your way. It's just the roll of the dice. You're playing a dice game. But if you're going to have fun and you want to be stupid and you want to be silly, you're going to play some
And this is
damn
why
orcs.
you should all
But
collect
on the
orcs.
opposite
Orcs
side
are
of the
superior.
fun part of this, let's talk about the
Necrons!
Necrons.
Edgy boys.
The Necrons are spooky, scary skeletons and very grimdark again. They have a much more fleshed out lore than before. Back in the day, they were just undead Egyptian space terminators, and they still look that way, but now they actually have a story. So way back in the day, you had the Necron tier. Kind of see a theme here: Eldari, Eldar, Krork, Orc, Necron, Necron tier. So the Necron tier were this race of
Yes, the Emperor's text-to-speech
kinda
taught us
shitty
about these guys.
people. Not because they were personally shitty, because their lives were awful. They were ill-fated to a horrible existence of like radiation and a terrible planet they lived on, and everything just really sucked. Being a Necron tier was just really depressing. They really were looking for immortality. They were extremely reliant on the hope that they would eventually find the key to living forever and just stave off this horrible
They were just
nature that they
silly
were
little guys
thrust
doing
upon
silly
them,
little
and
things, but
therefore
then they were
could
like,
become
yeah,
the
you know
dominant
what? We
race
kind
in
of
the
nestled on a
galaxy.
planet that doesn't
And they
really
found
serve
this
us that
group.
well.
They're called the Old Ones. Imagine them kind of like the Forerunners in Halo or the Xel'Naga in StarCraft, right?
Yes.
These Old Ones were these strong, pretty much omnipotent beings, and they, of course, knew the key to immortality. So the Necrons went to them and said, please, show us your ways. And the Old Ones said, piss off. Not really. They were a lot more humble about it, but they did not want to share their secret of immortality with
Please,
the
sir,
Necrons.
can we have some
The Necrons, of
immortality,
course,
sir?
took this
You want
very
immortality?
well
Impossible.
and waged war with them, kind of under this united banner. The Necron different dynasties didn't really like each other, but under this one man, the Silent King, he thought the best way to unite his race was to do this giant war with the Old Ones out of spite for them keeping the
To be fair, you're
secret
not really wrong,
immortality
Zero.
to them.
Everything in the
This
Warhammer
was known
universe
as the
kind of does
War
go back to
in
the old
Heaven,
ones.
And this is actually like a multi-stage war. Because during this war in heaven, they discovered the Star Gods, a whole new
Yes,
race of people.
the
known as
Star Gods, the
Katan.
people who are basically
And
giant
these
fart
Star
clouds that
Gods
needed to
were
consume
also
all
very
things.
much like old ones, almost omnipotent beings, and they too had the key to immortality. And so the Necrons went to them and said, "Hey, can you help us fight off the old ones? Can you help us kill these old ones, you, the Katan?" And the Katan said, "Yes, and in fact, we can help provide you with the immortality you so desperately seek." So the Silent King of the Necrons decided to make a pact with the Katan to allow them to accept this generous gift of immortality upon them. But this, of course, had been a horrendous trap, and the Necrons were dragged in chains to this biotransference where their flesh was stripped from them, replaced with nothing but a
You kind of
metal
have to feel a
hollow
little
shell
bit
as
sorry
their
for the
souls
were
were ripped from their body and fed
the Necrons.
to the Katan. And
They
the
really
Katan
didn't have a good time of it.
Fattened up. They got chonk on the souls of the Necrons. As this was their plan all along, they consumed the flesh and souls of the Necrons.
Thing is, as time is going by, some of the Necrons are getting back their individuality.
Just to serve their
So we're
will.
starting to see
And
like
then
there's
with
a
their
there's a
newfound
Warhammer show
Necron
coming out in the near
army,
future
they
actually, which
pointed their
kind of
guns at the Old
exposes
Ones,
some
and the
Necrons
Katan
with
continued
individuality
their
again, which is kind of cool.
domination of the stars and their genocide complete.
Also,
and
who remembers
full
that Dawn of War trailer with
genocide
the
of these Old
Necrons
Ones.
in it?
The Old Ones did their best to
Space
stave it
Marines.
off. They even created
I think it was
races,
Soulstorm,
the Eldari
I
and
think?
the Orcs to try to fight off the
That intro to
horrifying
this day is one of my
Necron
favorite
army
Dawn of War
and the
intros.
Katan above them, but there was absolutely no possible chance for them. And the Old Ones were absolutely extinguished across the galaxy. Their entire race completely removed. Full-on 100% genocide. However, during all this, the Katan, so just infatuated with their victory, started fighting each other for fun, for sport, and for small differences. Doesn't matter. The Catan with these overpowered people.
So
they're
what they've
gonna
learned is
eventually
they
beat
should have
each other at
shared.
some point.
They
And as
should
they began
have
just
shared.
Menially fighting each other, the Eldari and the Orcs actually started pushing on the Catan's borders a little bit, giving them a little bit of a run for their money. And as this continued, this is when the
Oh
Silent King,
yeah,
who
the
retained
original
his
orcs were like
consciousness,
actual
decided
good
to
guys.
leap
Like they
into
weren't
action
just
and
random
start a full
violent assholes. They actually
scale
teamed up with
revolt
people.
against their Catan
Like the
masters.
Eldar
And
and
this
the
revolt
original
was
Kroorks.
bloody,
They
as
actually
the
teamed up with
entire
people.
Necron
Think,
army
imagine
surged
orcs
up
teaming up
to
with
destroy
anyone
these
ever.
Star gods. They were able to, just after suffering horrendous losses, were able to turn the tide of the war. And they took these Catan and they blasted them. Because as these star gods are unkillable, they were able to break them into thousands of shards and entrap them.
What is it with
in
GW
giant
and
stasis
breaking
vaults
people's
to now
essences into
actually be
shards?
Slaves to the Necrons. And with the Necrons having the entirety of their old gods enslaved to them, they realized that soon their race was about to be attacked by the overcoming new races, the Eldari and the Kroorks. And so what they did is they retreated into giant stasis tombs in order to preserve their
yes,
energy
tomb worlds.
and their strength for when one day they would be reawakened and they would be able to rule the galaxy that was rightfully theirs. And then some dingus Adeptus Mechanicus guy diddled with a green console, and now the Necrons are back and they see all these
Of course it's the Adeptus Mechanicus' fault, because why wouldn't it be?
primitive races on their lawns, and they think, get the fuck off of it. The Necrons are back, super advanced, and they are.
And this
here
is
to
also explains why the
reclaim
why the
galaxy
Adeptus
that they
Mechanicus
so
is one of their
rightfully
main
is theirs.
guys. Is
On
basically a
tabletop,
Necron.
they're a lot like that. Tons of undead Egyptian skeleton robots that when they die, they just get right back up because they keep on reanimating. Hard to kill, tons of crazy stuff. You can use the Catan themselves as units to fight with. It's pretty cool. The Necrons are one of the three major events in 40k. The Horus Heresy, the Fall of the Eldar, and the Awakening of the Necrons are all pretty substantial events. And the Necrons themselves are pretty dang cool as well. Here's a good quote from a wonderful Dawn of War game.
You know what? Let's keep playing. I'm gonna really quick go pee.
Tranquility of death. I was like you once, clinging to life and blind to the truth. When I uncovered the truth, I too shuddered and paled with fear. Deep in these catacombs, I was remade. Here, my brethren slumbered for eons while the living grew like weed. My Lord knew this day would come. He had plans for us all. We would purge this world once more. So come, poor victims of life. We will grant you tranquility in these crypts. Kronos will be a tomb world once more. Necrons are also pretty smug. Trazen the Infinite especially, a little dickhead. But speaking of dickheads, last race, let's talk the Tau.
We made a fucking Wookiee.
The exact formation of the Tau Empire is not entirely understood. However, a long time ago, many thousands of years ago, in the 40k world that is, some Imperial navigation vessels were going around through different areas, and they saw a primitive race, blue people, smacking each other with sticks
I'm
and
back.
stones.
What did I miss? Ah, it's
Yeah.
the Tau.
Dumb Xenos race, who gives a shit, and they bailed. Then this giant warp storm occurred.
Ah, yes,
right
the
in that
weebs.
major area, unable to be breached.
The Tau.
Then, once that
The
warp
blue-skinned
storm 6,000
motherfuckers.
years later subsided.
Oh my god, Lucina,
Hello,
damn.
those little sticks. Well, they decided to actually have no war of any kind and all
There you
just
go.
unite together under one flag.
That's
of the
some
Tau
points being
Empire,
spent right there.
And now they have gigantic starships. And
I will
Gundam
say, the aesthetic of the Tau is awesome. But fuck the Tau.
robots and lasers and railguns and mechs, and they are here to ruin your day for the greater good. That is generally
The
Tau
greater
Empire.
good. Do you
And
guys
they
remember
have this
Fire
kind of
Warrior?
feeling
That game
of
was
this
bad.
homogenous group. All species
But cool.
can go underneath the banner of the greater good. The greater good is their idea of the fundamental increase and help of all. In fact, they are most likely the most like the Covenant in Halo. Where they have the
At least the
overarching
Covenant were
prophets being
cool.
the ethereals who are actually kind of dicks and like to pull at strings a little bit, but then you have all these different races directly underneath them, and they all work together in this big group as this large.
Isn't it great how
foreboding
humans are
race
so
that
xenophobic
tries to
that they have
spread their
never even
weirdly
considered
pseudo-religious influence
teaming up with other
across the
factions or
galaxy?
trying to
The alien is
harmonize
not
with other
intrinsically
factions?
evil.
They're just like,
Not
yeah,
hate
nah,
him,
humans
pity
kind of
him,
cool. We
his
don't need you
ignorance.
guys.
Seek to understand his differences and equate him with his inadequacies. Only then will he accept his place in the greater good. That is generally the Tau. And if you're kind of wondering like what their mainly big shtick is, well, they're all about big robots and mechs. They have
Mechs.
laser rifles and railguns.
I once played against a Tau who specialized his entire Tau team in melee combat. I shit you not. This guy looked at his big mechs with large rail cannons and said, nah, not for me. And he replaced every single one of his ranged rail cannons with big old laser swords. And because most of these units don't come with big old laser swords, he was so committed to this, he manually designed replacement parts for these Tau to replace their cannons with melee weapons. It was impressive, but it still sucked.
Guns. They got giant mechs with tons of missile pods and heavy rail rifles and rail guns and burst cannons.
I'm not denying that they are really cool. They are really cool, but they are, yeah, they're stupid as well.
And ion accelerators and void shields and all this stuff. And that is generally what the Tau's all about. But you're probably thinking, Bricky, this doesn't sound that evil. This doesn't sound very grim, dark Warhammer. And you'd be right. The Tau Empire really don't have that much of a horrifying, grim, dark style like everybody else. They're much more younger, new age thing.
They're much more about indoctrinating than they are conquering.
A lot even better than they are now back in the day because they liked having like that good guy faction. But a lot of us who really like the dark, depressing style of Warhammer didn't really like it that much. So, see, the Tau get a lot of hate, and a lot of that hate
I
isn't
wonder
necessarily
why.
Unjustified. It's mainly from a tabletop perspective, but as you can see from all the visuals I've shown
Also,
you
if it
recently,
puts
they
anything
don't
in
really
perspective,
fit
my sister, after
in the
collecting
40k
Chaos, then
universe
collected
very
Tau.
well. They lack that super dark, dramatic, kind of high gothic level the Imperium has. They don't have the weird kind of like grungy stuff that Chaos or say the Orcs do. And the Necrons and the Eldar have their own specific style as well. The Tau really do look like something out of Gundam. And while that isn't necessarily a bad thing, it does definitely not fit too well. There's that. There's also the tabletop problem. In tabletop, Tau are horrible at melee combat, but exceptionally good at ranged combat. So they blast everyone from really, really far away, and they have a million rules to make it so that it's nearly impossible for you to get into melee combat. So it basically just forces you
if
to
you're
bottleneck
orcs,
the game
oops.
into one specific gameplay style, which is gun to gun. And if you're doing gun to gun, they're going to win every time, because they're the Tau, and the Tau are really damn good at shooting.
My bullshit
So
radar
it's
is
one of
off
those things
the
that
is
make
off the
Tau
charts.
Generally rather hated, and a lot of different reasons for that, both from style and such. But this is actually one of the things I wanted to end this video with, is that the Tau, while they have their issues, you should not.
Do you think we're ever going to get a new faction? Or do we think that GW are now so satiated with making all the money off of the ones they already have that they're not going to like incorporate another one beyond side factions of what they already have?
Be discouraged from playing them. I'll make plenty of Tau weeaboo jokes, of course I will, but it's all generally in good fun. Anyone who legitimately doesn't want you to play a faction is an idiot, and you shouldn't be giving them the time of day. You pick what you think is cool.
Yeah, Seffi,
and
like,
what
it's such a
you
shame because
like.
GW
In
would
Warhammer
absolutely
especially
be
now,
so much more
factions get
profitable
better and
if they
get
made it
worse.
more
They
accessible
grow
price-wise.
and then they
Like,
fall.
they're slowly but
You should
surely
only be playing what
making
you
it
think is
impossible for
cool.
people to
You
actually
like
get
the look,
into
you
Warhammer
like
because
the
it's too
models.
freaking
If you're talking
expensive!
tabletop,
Even
that
though the
what you
price
should
of
be
making
going for
models has
every
gone
time
down.
is what you think is badass, because things change all the time. But the universe of Warhammer has so much going for it. Every faction has something interesting, every character has a story, and there's a million stories to be told. The universe is vast and exciting.
Oh,
and
this
while
was a
it's
good
dark,
video, though.
depressing, and
Man,
horrible,
I feel
that
like-
is the
ah!
damn charm. And
I
out of
really
everything
want to
I've
like
told you in these
Warhammer.
two
I
videos,
do.
the
I
main
love
thing
its
to
lore.
take
I love its
away
universe, but
is
trying
the
to be
reason
part of the
why
Warhammer
Sully
universe
West
for
is
the
so
tabletop
into this
game is
series
really
and why we
difficult.
like
And
it
with the way
so
GW are
much.
treating their
Because
content
there's
creators,
so much
it's
variety,
really,
such an
really, really,
expansive
really,
universe,
really, really,
and
really
so
hard
much
to
that can be
actually
done.
want to be part of it when GW treat their
Find
audience so
yourself having
badly.
a pretty great time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it has been
To that extent, though, I am
informative.
definitely looking forward to Space Marine 2, though. That is a certainty that I'm playing. Well, that was fun. And I'm sure I'm going to have a great deal of fun editing this, especially for the start. But now we're all learned. We've all learned something from this, I feel. Yeah. Good show. Good old Bricky with his edumacation.